So you're taking our home, just like that? Arlene's voice trembled as she stared at her son, Elliot, and the young woman by his side. Elliot's gaze hardened. Mom, we've been over this. You promised me the family estate when I turned 30. Well, I'm 30 now, and Iris and I have big plans for the place. Arlene exchanged a worried glance with her husband, Theo. This wasn't the son they'd raised, the one who used to dream of traveling the world, not inheriting property. Elliot's son, Theo began, his tone calm but firm. We never made that promise. The estate has been in your mother's family for generations. Iris, Elliot's girlfriend, stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed. With all due respect, Mr. Wilkins, Elliot has told me of this supposed promise, and we intend to follow through on it. Arlene fought back tears, her heart aching at the thought of losing her beloved ancestral home. This is absurd. We've never discussed anything like that. Maybe you don't remember, Iris said coolly, but we have a legal contract that states otherwise. Elliot nodded, his expression hard. I'm sorry, Mom, Dad, but this is happening, whether you like it or not. As Arlene watched her son turn and walk away, arm in arm with Iris, she felt a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. This was only the beginning of a battle she never saw coming, a battle to save not just her home, but her family. Over the next few days, the tension in the Wilkins household was palpable. Arlene spent hours poring over old documents, desperate to find any shred of evidence to support Elliot's claim. But there was nothing. How could he do this to us? She asked Theo one night, her voice hoarse from crying. Theo pulled her close, his brow furrowed with worry. I don't know, Arlene, but we can't let them take what's rightfully yours. Arlene nodded, her resolve hardening. She would fight for her home, no matter what it took. A week later, Elliot and Iris arrived unannounced, their expressions smug. We've given you plenty of time to get your affairs in order, Iris said, her tone icy. Now we'll be taking over the estate. Arlene felt her heart rate quicken as she studied the young woman before her. There was something calculating, almost predatory in Iris's gaze. Like hell you will, Arlene shot back, surprising even herself with her vehemence. Elliot's eyes widened. Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. But Arlene had made up her mind. She wasn't about to let this conniving woman waltz in and steal her family's legacy. Listen closely, Iris, she said, her voice low and steady. This is my home, and if you think you can just take it from me, you've got another thing coming. As Iris's eyes narrowed dangerously, Arlene knew she was in for the fight of her life. But she was ready to protect her family, her history, and everything she held dear. In the days that followed, I quickly discovered that Iris wasn't just a conniving girlfriend, she was a force to be reckoned with, and she had powerful allies on her side. You might want to rethink this little crusade of yours, she said one afternoon, a smug smile playing on her lips. My uncle happens to be one of the biggest real estate developers in the city. I felt a chill run down my spine as the realization hit me. If Iris's uncle threw his weight behind her, we could lose more than just the family estate. Theo must have sensed my unease, because he reached for my hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. We're not backing down, he said, his voice unwavering. This is our home, and we'll fight for it. Iris let out a derisive laugh. Suit yourselves, but don't say I didn't warn you. As she turned and sauntered out, I couldn't help but feel like we were in over our heads. That night, Theo and I sat in the living room, the weight of our predicament hanging heavy in the air. What are we going to do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Theo sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. We can't let them intimidate us, Arlene. We have to stand our ground. I nodded, but deep down, I was terrified. Iris wasn't just some spoiled brat. She was a calculating, ruthless woman who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. Over the next few weeks, the tension only escalated. Elliot, once our sweet, kind-hearted son, had become a stranger under Iris's influence. He would show up at the estate unannounced, making demands and veiled threats. You're only making this harder on yourselves, he said one day, his eyes cold and distant. I wanted to reach out and shake him, to make him see the truth, that Iris was using him, manipulating him for her own gain. But Theo held me back, his grip firm but gentle. Don't engage, he murmured. That's what she wants. So I bit my tongue and watched as my son, my flesh and blood, turned his back on us once again. It was during one of these tense encounters that I had an idea. a desperate, last-ditch effort to make Iris see reason. "If you're so confident in your ability to manage this estate," I said, my voice laced with barely contained anger, "then prove it." Iris raised an eyebrow, her interest piqued. "What did you have in mind?" "We'll give you 3 months," I continued. 3 months to run the estate as you see fit. If you can turn a profit and keep everything running smoothly, we'll consider your claim." Iris's eyes narrowed, but I could see the glimmer of challenge in her gaze. "And if I fail?" "Then you and Elliot walk away," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. "For good." For a moment, the room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Iris's lips curled into a smile that sent shivers down my spine. "You've got a deal." As she shook my hand, her grip firm and unyielding, I knew I had just set into motion a dangerous game, one where the stakes were higher than ever before. But I was determined to win, no matter the cost. With Iris's confidence bordering on arrogance, she wasted no time in taking control of the estate. Within days, she had fired half the staff, claiming they were incompetent and costly. "This place is a mess," she sneered as she strutted through the halls, her high heels clicking against the hardwood floors. "No wonder it's been hemorrhaging money." Theo tried to reason with her, but she would have none of it. "This is my show now, old man," she said, her lips curled into a condescending smile. "And things are going to change around here." I could only watch helplessly as Iris systematically dismantled everything we had built over the years. She brought in her own people, most of whom seemed more interested in lining their pockets than actually running the estate. "She's going to run this place into the ground," Theo muttered one night as we lay in bed, the weight of our worries keeping us both awake. I knew he was right, but I also knew that we had to give Iris a chance, as much as it pained me. If she failed, it would be her own undoing. But as the weeks ticked by, it became increasingly clear that Iris was no mere incompetent novice. She was a cunning, manipulative woman with a knack for skirting the rules and cutting corners. "We need to be more aggressive with our pricing," she announced at a staff meeting one day. "If people can't afford to stay here, that's their problem." I watched in horror as she implemented a series of changes that all but guaranteed the estate would bleed money. Higher rates, fewer amenities, and a general disregard for customer satisfaction. "She's sabotaging herself," Theo whispered to me after the meeting. "She has to be." But I wasn't so sure. There was a calculating gleam in Iris's eye that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. And then, the unthinkable happened. One of our most loyal, long-standing employees, a groundskeeper who had been with us for over a decade, was unceremoniously fired. "You're letting him go?" I asked incredulously, my heart breaking for the kind, hard-working man. Iris shrugged, her expression indifferent. "He's past his prime. We need fresh blood around here." As I watched the man gather his belongings, tears streaming down his weathered face, I felt a white-hot rage simmering beneath the surface. This had gone too far. That night, after Iris had retired to her quarters, I cornered Elliot in the hallway. "How can you let her do this?" I demanded, my voice trembling with emotion. "She's destroying everything we've built, everything your grandfather left us." For a moment, Elliot's gaze flickered with something akin to doubt, but then, just as quickly, it hardened once again. "Iris knows what she's doing, Mom," he said, his tone dismissive. "You need to trust her." As he brushed past me, I knew in that moment that I had lost him, at least for now. But I also knew that I couldn't give up. If Iris wanted a war, she would get one. As the weeks wore on, it became increasingly clear that Iris's true colors were starting to show. The once confident, self-assured woman was now a frazzled, short-tempered tyrant, barking orders at anyone who crossed her path. "This place is a nightmare," she hissed at Elliot one morning, her voice dripping with venom. "I don't know how you ever thought we could make a profit here." Elliot, to his credit, seemed taken aback by her outburst. "Iris, calm down. We just need to stay the course." But Iris was having none of it. With a dismissive wave of her hand, she stalked off, leaving Elliot standing there, a bewildered expression on his face. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction at the sight. Perhaps now, my son would finally see the truth about his so-called girlfriend. But my satisfaction was short-lived. Over the next few days, Iris's erratic behavior only escalated. She was constantly firing staff, changing policies on a whim, and making rash decisions that only served to drive the estate further into the red. "This is madness," Theo said one night, his brow furrowed with worry. "She's going to bankrupt us at this rate." I nodded grimly, knowing that he was right. But there was a part of me that couldn't help but wonder if Iris's actions were all part of some larger scheme. My suspicions were confirmed a few days later when one of the staff members, a young woman named Sarah, approached me with a disturbing revelation. "Mrs. Wilkins," she said, her voice hushed and her eyes darting around nervously, "I think you should take a look at these." In her trembling hands she held a stack of documents, contracts, invoices, and receipts, all bearing Iris's signature. As I flipped through them, my heart sank. These weren't just bad business decisions. They were outright fraudulent activities, designed to siphon money from the estate and into Iris's own pockets. "How did you get these?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Sarah swallowed hard. "I overheard Iris talking on the phone. She was boasting about how she was going to bleed this place dry and take everything for herself." I felt a cold fury wash over me. So that was Iris's game. To deliberately run the estate into the ground, all while lining her own pockets with our money. "That snake," I hissed, my fingers tightening around the damning evidence in my hands. Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "I knew something wasn't right. That's why I started keeping copies of everything." In that moment, I felt a surge of gratitude for this young woman's bravery and foresight. She had just handed me the ammunition I needed to take Iris down once and for all. As I clutched the documents to my chest, I knew that the time for playing nice was over. Iris had crossed a line, and now she would have to face the consequences. I was going to make sure of it. With the damning evidence in hand, I knew I had to act quickly. Iris was a snake in the grass, and if I didn't expose her soon, she would slither away with everything we had. The first order of business was to confront Elliot. As much as it pained me to see him so blinded by Iris's manipulation, I knew he deserved to know the truth. "Son, we need to talk," I said, my voice firm but tinged with concern. Elliot looked up from his laptop, his brow furrowed. "What is it, Mom?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself for what was to come. "It's about Iris. I have proof that she's been embezzling funds from the estate." For a moment, Elliot's expression was one of disbelief. But as I laid out the evidence, the fraudulent contracts, the inflated invoices, the paper trail of deceit, his face fell. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "It can't be true." But the facts were undeniable, and deep down I knew he could see it too. "I'm sorry, Elliot," I said, reaching out to touch his arm, "but she's been playing you this whole time." Tears welled in my son's eyes, and for a moment I thought he might break down. But then something shifted in his gaze, a flicker of determination that I hadn't seen in far too long. "That lying bitch," he growled, his fists clenching at his sides. It was in that moment that I knew we had a chance to take Iris down and reclaim what was rightfully ours. But just as we were plotting our next move, a familiar figure stormed into the room, his eyes blazing with fury. It was the groundskeeper Iris had so callously fired, the one who had dedicated years of his life to maintaining our beloved estate. "You need to see this," he said, thrusting a manila envelope into my hands. Inside were pictures, damning photographs of Iris meeting with shady-looking individuals, exchanging what appeared to be stacks of cash. "I took these a few days ago," the groundskeeper explained, his voice trembling with rage. "That woman is up to no good, and I aim to prove it." I felt a surge of gratitude towards this loyal man who had risked everything to expose Iris's misdeeds. "Thank you," I said, squeezing his hand. "This is exactly what we need." As the groundskeeper nodded and turned to leave, I knew that the tipping point had been reached. Iris's web of lies and deceit was unraveling, and soon she would have nowhere left to hide. Turning to Elliot, I saw a fire burning in his eyes, a determination to right the wrongs that had been committed against our family. "It's time," he said, his voice steely with resolve. "Time to take back what's ours." And in that moment, I knew that we were finally on the path to victory. A victory that had been hard-fought and long overdue. Iris's reign of terror was about to come crashing down around her, and we would be there to watch it all unfold. With the evidence mounting against Iris, I knew it was time to confront her once and for all. I gathered Theo, Elliot and the loyal staff members who had risked everything to expose her misdeeds. "Are you sure about this, Arlene?" Theo asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I nodded, my resolve unwavering. "It's the only way. We have to bring her down before she destroys us all." Elliot placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "I'm with you, Mom. Let's end this once and for all." Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and marched towards Iris's office, the others trailing close behind. As we approached the door, I could hear her voice, shrill and demanding, as she barked orders at some unseen lackey. Without hesitation, I threw open the door, the damning evidence clutched tightly in my hands. "Enough, Iris," I said, my voice ringing with authority. "The game is over." Iris's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight of our little posse. "What is the meaning of this?" she spat, her lip curling in disdain. I held up the stack of documents, letting them speak for themselves. "We know what you've been up to, Iris. The embezzlement, the fraudulent deals, it all stops now." For a moment, Iris's expression faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. But then, just as quickly, she regained her composure, her mask of arrogance slipping back into place. "You have no proof," she sneered, her eyes darting from one of us to the next. "Just a bunch of baseless accusations." It was then that Elliot stepped forward, his face a mask of steely determination. "That's where you're wrong, Iris," he said, his voice laced with barely contained fury. "We have all the proof we need." He gestured to the groundskeeper, who stepped forward with the envelope of damning photographs. "Care to explain these?" Iris's eyes widened as she took in the incriminating images, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before our very eyes. "You bitch," she hissed, her mask of civility finally shattering. "You think you can take me down? You have no idea who you're dealing with." But even as the words left her lips, I could see the fear flickering in her eyes. She knew she was cornered, her web of lies finally catching up to her. "It's over, Iris," I said, my voice heavy with finality. "You've lost." Iris opened her mouth to respond, but the words never came. Instead, she simply stared at us, her eyes burning with a potent mix of hatred and defeat. It was in that moment that I knew we had won. Not just the battle for our home, but the war against Iris's deceit and betrayal. As we filed out of her office, leaving her to stew in her own failure, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. The nightmare was finally coming to an end. But even as we celebrated our victory, I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. Iris was a formidable foe, and I had no doubt that she would try to retaliate in any way she could. Yet as I looked at Elliot, his face alight with determination, and Theo, his eyes shining with pride, I knew that we were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. We were a family, united and unbreakable, and no matter what Iris threw our way, we would face it together, just as we had faced everything else. Because in the end, that's what mattered most: family, loyalty, and the unshakable bond that ties us all together. And with that, I knew that we had already won the most important battle of all. In the aftermath of our confrontation with Iris, a tense silence settled over the estate. We all knew that this was far from over, that the snake we had cornered would likely strike back with everything she had. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Iris resurfaced, her eyes blazing with fury and her lips curled into a snarl of defiance. "You think you've won?" she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You've only made things worse for yourselves." Elliot, to his credit, stood firm, his expression resolute. "It's over, Iris. We have all the evidence we need to take you down." But Iris simply laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, Elliot, you sweet, naive fool. Do you really think it's that simple?" Before any of us could react, she whirled on me, her gaze piercing and accusatory. "You've made a grave mistake, Arlene, and I'm going to make sure you pay dearly for it." I felt a flicker of fear in the pit of my stomach, but I refused to let it show. "Are those threats, Iris? Because if they are, you've just sealed your own fate." Iris's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might lunge at me. But then, just as quickly, her expression shifted, a sickly sweet smile spreading across her face. "No threats, darling," she purred, her tone dripping with mock sincerity. "Just a friendly warning." With that, she turned on her heel and swept out of the room, leaving a trail of tension and unease in her wake. "She's unhinged," Theo muttered, his brow furrowed with worry. "Who knows what she's capable of?" I nodded grimly, knowing that he was right. Iris was a desperate, cornered animal, and that made her all the more dangerous. But even as the threat of her retaliation loomed over us, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that the truth had finally come to light. Elliot, my sweet, misguided son, had finally seen Iris for the manipulative, deceitful person she truly was. As the days passed, I could see the weight of his guilt settling heavily upon his shoulders. He would often seek me out, his eyes filled with remorse and regret. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said one evening, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have listened to you from the start." I pulled him into a tight embrace, my heart aching for the pain he was feeling. "It's all right, Elliot. What matters now is that we've stopped her." But even as the words left my lips, I knew that the road ahead would be far from easy. Iris was a formidable adversary, and I had no doubt that she would stop at nothing to exact her revenge. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the first salvo was fired. A letter arrived from Iris's lawyers threatening legal action and demanding that we drop all charges against her. "They can't be serious," Elliot scoffed, crumpling the letter in his fist. "We have all the evidence we need to bury her." But Theo's expression was grave, his eyes clouded with worry. "Arlene, we can't take this lightly. Iris has connections, and she'll stop at nothing to protect herself." I knew he was right. Iris was a snake, and like any snake, she would strike when we least expected it. But as I looked around at my family, their faces etched with determination and resolve, I knew that we were ready for whatever she threw our way. Because this time, we were fighting not just for our home, but for our very souls. And no matter how hard Iris tried, she would never be able to take that away from us. With a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and met Theo's gaze, my own eyes burning with a fire that had been stoked by years of betrayal and lies. "Let her try," I said, my voice low and steady. "We're not backing down. Not now. Not ever." Because in the end, that's what this was all about. Standing our ground, protecting what was rightfully ours, and ensuring that justice was served. And as we braced ourselves for the battle ahead, I knew that no matter what Iris had in store for us, we would face it head-on, united and unbreakable. For that was the true strength of family, a bond that could never be severed, no matter how hard the enemy tried. In the weeks that followed, Iris's threats of legal action proved to be little more than empty posturing. With the mountain of evidence we had against her, even her high-priced lawyers knew they were fighting a losing battle. "It's over, Iris," Elliot said, his voice ringing with finality as we gathered in the estate's grand foyer. "The authorities have everything they need to put you away for a long time." Iris's eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin, defiant line. "This isn't the end, Elliot. Mark my words, I'll make you all pay for this." But even as the words left her mouth, I could see the fear flickering behind her eyes. She knew she had been beaten, her carefully constructed facade of deceit crumbling around her. As the authorities led her away in handcuffs, her head held high, but her shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The nightmare was finally over, or so I thought. In the days that followed, Elliot grew increasingly withdrawn, his once vibrant spirit dulled by the weight of his own guilt and shame. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said one evening, his voice barely above a whisper. "I let that woman blind me to everything that was important." I pulled him into a tight embrace, my heart aching for the pain he was feeling. "It's all right, Elliot. What matters now is that we've come through this stronger than ever." But even as the words left my lips, I could see the doubt lingering in his eyes. He was a man haunted by his own mistakes, struggling to find his way back to the path he had so carelessly strayed from. It was in those moments that I realized the true cost of Iris's betrayal. She had nearly torn our family apart, her poisonous influence seeping into the very fabric of our lives and leaving a trail of pain and mistrust in its wake. But even as the wounds she had inflicted still stung, I knew that we had a choice: to let her actions define us, or to rise above them and reclaim the bond that had sustained us for so long. And so we chose the latter. With each passing day, we worked to rebuild the trust that had been shattered, to mend the rifts that Iris had so callously created. It wasn't easy, but slowly, surely, we began to heal. Elliot, bless his heart, was the driving force behind our reconciliation. He threw himself into the task of restoring the estate to its former glory, working tirelessly to undo the damage that Iris had wrought. "This is my penance," he would say, his brow glistening with sweat as he toiled away in the gardens or tended to the repairs that had been so long neglected. And as I watched him pour his heart and soul into the task, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. This was the son I had raised, the one whose loyalty and determination had been momentarily clouded but never truly lost. As the months passed, the estate slowly but surely began to regain its former luster, a testament to the resilience of our family and the unbreakable bond that had seen us through even the darkest of times. And on the day that we finally moved back into our ancestral home, a weight seemed to lift from our shoulders, a weight that had been born of Iris's deceit and the turmoil she had brought into our lives. "We made it," Theo said, his eyes shining with pride as he surveyed the restored grandeur of the estate. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. We did, and we'll never let anyone tear us apart again. As we gathered together, a family once more united and whole, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey we had taken, a journey that had tested us in ways we never could have imagined, but one that had ultimately strengthened the bonds that truly mattered. And as the sun set over our beloved home, casting a warm golden glow over the grounds, I knew that we had emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more resolute than ever before. For in the end, that was the true lesson we had learned, that family was not just a bond of blood, but a sacred trust that could weather even the fiercest of storms. And with that knowledge firmly in our hearts, we stepped forward into a future that was brighter and more promising than ever before.